Right, welcome to Quad Pod. It's I'm going to say episode 23. I'm terrible with numbers. It doesn't matter. I'm Al. Now, I'm not going to introduce my guest straight away. This is an audio rather than a visual, although he's definitely got a face for TV, but that's a different subject. I've looked on Wikipedia. He's not a physicist and he's not an art curator. He is. In my opinion, one of the best sports journalists that there has been in southern England. And I'm really excited to talk about and get to one of the people involved with the fanzine culture around Exeter City. For our younger listeners, I want to put it into context. This was the days before email, internet, and we had club calls. Right, so the sports reporter, Western Gazette, Yeovil, Derby Evening, newspaper, Express and Echo, Bristol Echo, and the Southern Daily Press, is it? I'm going to introduce Simon Carter. How are you?
Evening, Al. How's it going?
Yeah, good. He also is a learned author. Gus Honeybun, your boys took a serious beating, or words to that effect, which, if you're an older Exeter fan, you'll absolutely understand the reference to Gus Honeybun. And I never had my birthday read out by Gus Honeybun, and I never wish to have my birthday read out by Gus Honeybun. So, how are you doing today? Are you well?
Yes, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. Nice day off. Nice
Nice
sunny day in Exeter in the Imperial Beer Garden earlier on, having a pint. Doesn't get much better than that in May, does it?
Yeah, you picked one of the best days, and you
lovely warm.
After this, if it's still light, I'm going to water my garden. So, a bit of background: fanzines. I'm going to talk about fanzine culture. I looked at the first episode of Exe Directory, which was an Exeter City related fans program. I want to describe it as. It was would you agree with me? It was sort of like a pre-runner of podcasts as well.
Very much so. I mean, I think the fanzine culture kind of started mid-80s. Where they had the Foul magazine back in the 70s, which was kind of not an anarchic look, but a kind of an offbeat look at the Football League.
Yeah.
Kind of like for older fans, obviously you had the Shoot magazine for kind of say teenagers, and I think the Foul magazine was aimed very much towards adults. And then it kind of died a death towards the end. I think it was only short-lived Foul, and then mid-80s, the fanzine culture kind of started, and then by within 1988 was obviously the year the Exe Directory started. By that time, a lot of clubs, not the majority of clubs, but a lot of clubs had fanzines. And then literally within 12 months, 2 years, most clubs, including non-league clubs, had fanzines. The top some clubs had 3 or 4. There were Sports Pages shop in London, which you might remember.
Yeah.
Which was the rig of going to anybody when we played in London back in like late 80s, early 90s. You had to go to Sports Pages on Charing Cross Road. Easily spent half an hour there. They had all the fanzines in the country, rows and rows and rows of them. You could buy 10, 15 magazines.
This was before the interweb, the website culture that we have now, wasn't it?
Very much so. I mean, I think the fanzine heyday was certainly kind of 87 to 92, really. The internet kind of started to kick in late 1990s from memory. I think I had it when I was working at Express and Echo, actually. I think we had it in 97, 98. But it was obviously infancy. And obviously obviously fanzines are still going. I mean, the Exe Directory, obviously this last edition was a long time ago, but some fanzines are still going. When I was at Ipswich the other day, I saw some Ipswich fanzines being sold behind the Bobby Robson stand.
Did you? Yeah. Now that's interesting because in the back of the Exe Directory, and to give a bit of a description about it. So September 1988 was the first episode.
It was dated September 88. It would have gone on sale the first home game of the season, which I think was back then. Seasons didn't start kind of mid to late August.
Right.
So it would have gone on sale that first home game of the season, which was Wrexham.
And in terms of the culture, so whereas nowadays you get the program seller, this was fans producing this content in a proper, adult form, right? Selling it outside the ground as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was as easy as that. I mean, at that stage, at the time, I'd just left journalism college in Cardiff, summer of '88, and I got my first job in Yeovil. Right. So when the Exe Directory started, I was actually living in Yeovil and working. But it was totally an Exeter production. Dave and Alan Cockford, they were obviously both living in Exeter. The fanzine was printed in Exeter, and it was obviously sold by City fans, just a few of us, at every home game, and obviously copies were taken to away games. Back then, not that many fans went away.
Yes.
It's not like nowadays.
Yeah, no, it's really changed. And in the back of that first edition, there was a directory of other fanzines, and I did a little count. So there were 9 general football fanzines, including Off the Ball, The Absolute Game, and When Saturday Comes, which is still a magazine, I think, to this day. It may have stopped.
No, it's still going. You can still buy it in W.H. Smith's.
Can you still buy that?
I was reading it in W.H. Smith's Exeter the other day.
Right. Okay. And then in England, there was 37 directories that you had listed, right? And there were 6 in Scotland. So we were fairly early on, I'm going to say, in terms of producing. I say we, you guys, and producing the Exe Directory. You did it quite early. How did it come about? Did you all get in a pub or?
No, I say I was living either in Cardiff or in Yeovil at the time when Dave and Alan had the germ of the idea. But again, as football fans, I mean, we were all teenagers at the time. I was 19, Dave would have been 19, Alan would have been 17 probably. So whether that was young for fanzine editors at the time, possibly not. It was their idea, their brainchild. They were the ones who got it off the ground.
Yeah.
And obviously friends of theirs were kind of roped in to help write.
Yes.
So there was a hardy band of us to start with, and then obviously once it's out there and people start buying it and reading, then obviously people ideally start contributing. So to start with, there's obviously a group of X amount of people writing it. Yeah. But then after a while, you start to get contributors, and then they start to become regular contributors, and obviously from then you've got more content and equals bigger fanzines.
And just about producing the content, I mean, we're both of an age, so I'm hoping not to embarrass myself now. There weren't a lot of laptops and computers around in those days, were there?
No, I think I remember going around Alan's place in Pinnow Road, I think he was living then, and he had like a laptop, and that's where the stories were written.
Okay.
And from there, they were obviously sent to, I think they were printed down Fore Street. I don't know if the place is still there, but I remember going there a couple of times to pick up the boxes.
Right.
The fanzines. But no, it was totally Exeter-based production.
Right. And for anybody, which is brilliant to hear, and for anybody that doesn't understand the history of this, they used to sell out. They were very, very popular. It was better. I remember going to matches myself, and it was the only thing I wanted to get. I didn't want to get a program. I wanted to get a copy of the fanzine because I could sit and read it. And I know a lot of people were sitting and reading on the limited away travel at times and stuff. But it was a very younger, I'm going to say teen up to 45 audience, would you say?
I'd say that's probably correct, yeah. I mean, whether there's any, obviously, for those who remember, the Exeter City programme back in the mid-'80s was very poor. Flimsy, nothing in it of interest whatsoever. It started to get a little bit better by the time the fanzines, the Exe Directory started, but it was still poor until Mike Blackstone took over kind of, I don't know, early 1992, 93, 94. I mean, Mike Blackstone was a legend, as you know, and his programmes ended up becoming the best in the league. The argument there was probably mid-'80s, City had the worst programme in the league. So if you're a City fan, there's obviously the Express Echo, and that was possibly it, the Western Morning News, I guess. But there was nowhere else to kind of get any information. Obviously, this is by far and away the internet age.
This was
I understand why fanzines took off the way they did.
It was a premium number club call if you were lucky, I think.
38p a minute. I've just seen I think in the ED, the first edition, there was a bit on Club Call. So I think that started in the summer of '88 as well.
Yes.
And it said 38p. I was looking it up earlier on, 38p a minute. And that was quite expensive. When I just left Cardiff as a journalism student, and we paid 70p for a pint of lager. So for 38p for a minute just to hear some gubbins on City,
And it
is quite expensive.
Yeah. And it was 50p, wasn't it? To your point. So
the Exe Directory was 50p.
Yeah. So that was maybe a pint and a half it cost. I think, is that fair to say at the time?
Yeah, I mean, pint was 70p, so it was cheaper than the pint.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So I've got one here actually. So the first edition, 32 pages, and obviously there's no advertising. It's all done on a laptop. It looks like a 1980s production on a computer that youngsters now would laugh at.
Yes. Oh God! But the illustrations were fantastic. So
they used. I can't remember who it was, but we used to get like a cartoonist to kind of obviously do a front cover.
Yes.
And that wasn't done. That wasn't done by any kind of Dave or Al or anybody.
Right, okay.
That was a professional cartoonist.
Yeah, they were good. They were good. And the fanzines hooked into not just Exeter stuff, but also the culture of stuff going around in the country at the time. So, for example, one of the funniest ones I think is the Loads of Money front page, and you had Harry Enfield, and it was a play on the sartorial comment of Loads of Money, wasn't it? So
yeah, it's a sort of era. I mean, football was getting kind of amongst the fans. It was getting kind of politicised back in the late '80s. And again, for those who remember, you obviously had Thatcher's government. They were kind of demonising football fans. You had Colin Moynihan, who was the sports minister, wanting to bring kind of national football identity cards, which was obviously hugely unpopular.
Yes.
I think from those unpopular policies, the fanzine culture kind of gained legs. And grew. And obviously, football as the 80s went on, football became more popular. And obviously, following Italian '90, as history writes it now, it became even more popular. But back in the '80s, as you can possibly remember, it was dying on its feet at all levels. I didn't miss an extra home game between '84 and '87, and most of those were 2,000 fans. 1,500, 1,300. For those now, used to go into City for the last 10 years, and certainly for the season we've just had with the crowds we've had, different world. You wouldn't even recognise it.
Yeah, no, it was unheard of, and I'm just a teeny bit younger than you, and my first away travel season I was allowed to go really in terms of age was probably '88, so it tied in very nicely with me and my coming of age as a football fan. So and one of the great covers was Hartlepool away, because it captured what happened in the away end. Were you in the away end that day?
I didn't go that. No, I say for that first couple of years I was working in Yeovil, so as a sports journalist, I was kind of covering games at weekends. So the first couple of years of the Exe Directory, the first year I literally saw just a handful. Second year was championship year, so I managed to get to a few more.
So let's go through. So Hartlepool away 1988 was the famous moment where Terry Cooper, we were losing, went into the away end and asked the fans who we thought we should keep, I think, from memory, which was brilliantly captured by Exe Directory, I'm going to say. And then I noticed January 1989, I didn't realise this, but this fits in. So this is that championship year? Or just before?
Years 89-90.
Yeah, 89-90. They were talking about travel sickness pills because we couldn't win. You then picked up on April 1989 was Hillsborough, and there was a huge edition related to Hillsborough, which was expertly captured, I thought, by Exe Directory. May 89, there's a picture of Terry Cooper and Ivor Doble on deck chairs, saying that it's nice to be on the beach because Torquay were at Wembley, but I can't remember. Was it the Sherpa Van Trophy that they were?
Yeah. Sherpa Van Trophy.
So
they lost to Belton.
And that's just pre the fan band stuff, because there was all the stuff within Exe Directory of how to break the fan ban at Torquay, wasn't there?
That's right, yeah. Because I mean, me and Dave Crockford were at Torquay when they played Wolves in '86, and obviously Wolves ended up having three sides of the ground. There was almighty amounts of trouble. To this day, I've never seen a match so violent in all my life. And had Wolves lost, they won 2-1, there would have been absolute carnage. So obviously on the back of that, Torquay then introduced their or started to talk about introducing their away fans ban. And obviously when City went there in '88, '89, it was obviously our nearest away game of the season, and obviously fans were banned. I know a couple of guys did get in.
Well, it's interesting because in the Exe Directory there was like I'm not going to say idiot's guide, that's wrong, but you get the gist. It was an idiot's guide of how to get into Torquay, how to get an address in Torquay registered months before the game. And there were how many City fans? I wasn't there that day.
I wasn't there either, but I was told there was obviously a relatively good amount.
Yeah, there was a good amount.
What people would think is a good amount today, it was so different. What was a good amount back in the '80s?
Yeah. And that day, I was in Plymouth watching Crystal Palace. Mark Bright and Ian Wright beat Plymouth Argyle, which was the next best thing at the time. So. And then there's other ones. We've talked about money. Chris Vinicum, they did a feature in '89, just before November '89, as he was sold, and he was sold in the Championship year, wasn't he?
That's right. So 2 or 3 months in. So
we lost one of our best players, and Exe Directory reported it as basically money coming out of every drawer in a caricature of the chairman's office, which was brilliant at the time, and sort of sums up where we are today a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I think when Vinicum was sold, it was probably, we'd sold players before. I mean, I remember Mark Robson going to Tottenham, but you're talking 40, 50 grand, which obviously today is nothing for kind of Exeter's best youngsters. But back then, it was a lot of cash. And so Vinicum, whatever, he went to Glasgow Rangers, which is a story in itself, really. A guy playing for Exeter in Division 4, he ended up going to Glasgow Rangers. I can't remember what the fees were, but obviously it was an extra transfer.
It was about 600,000, though.
I don't know. I guess it was based on appearances, but obviously the link there was obviously Rangers at the time were managed by Graham Souness, who was one of Terry Cooper's best buddies in football. They played together at Middlesbrough in the 70s. That was the link.
Because I do remember bumping into Graham Souness at Rochdale away, and he had and this is just before he put the bid in, and he'd obviously come down to have a look at him, and he was wearing a big coat, and I literally almost bumped into him.
Yeah, he was great friends with Terry Cooper. When Souness went to manage Southampton in '96, Terry Cooper was virtually the assistant manager.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. That was Terry Cooper's way back into football after he left City second time.
So Exe Directory, absolute success. So how many years did it go on for?
The last edition was, I've got it here actually, was dated March, April 1995. So obviously that was the season we ended up finishing bottom of the 4th division. And that was the last edition.
So that's 7 years, and that partly in line with you guys all getting super busy with work, I guess
so. I mean, bizarrely, that kind of coincided with me moving back to Exeter, May '95, to work for the Echo. But no, I can't remember the ins and outs of why it kind of died a death. I know there were only a few editions in that last. It started off being monthly and was for most of its tenure, but then I think the last season it was kind of only brought out every other month.
So that sits very nicely with the next part of this. I wanted to talk a little bit with you about your career and what you've done. Because to go back, Yeovil, you've been at Bristol, you went to Derby, that's quite a long way.
Yeovil to Derby, then back to Exeter for 4 years at the Echo, then up to Bristol, Sports Edge at Southampton for 15 years, and the last 5 years I've been at Portsmouth.
Now, the Express and Echo, was in a completely different place. There was no internet. Yeah.
No, I mean, it is a world away now. I mean, obviously, lots of things are a world away from what they were 1995. It's 28 years ago. But obviously, when I started work at the Echo, they were up Soughton. So I think they moved into, obviously, in Simple Street for those people who can remember them in Sidwell Street. And then it moved to start in a kind of glitzy building with the printing press. So I moved there in May '95, and obviously it was a daily paper. And obviously now you look at it, A, it's a weekly paper. B, sadly it's thin, and there's no staff, there's no office in Exeter. You look inside the Express Echo, and the address they give is Plymouth, which as a starting point is poor. It's incredibly poor from a brand point of view. But then you go online, and obviously the Express Echo doesn't exist anymore, does it? Online, no, it's all under the umbrella of Devon Live.
Yes.
You've lost in an instant. You've lost your brand identity.
Yes, and so it's gone away from the logistics of little vans literally taking out papers to corner shops in the old days, and it used to be the main form where you get any city news, didn't it?
Like all regional papers. I mean, obviously, papers are still delivered to newsagents, but you obviously haven't got the old guy selling it in the high street, selling the Echo, which obviously I remember when I was a kid, let alone when I worked for the paper. But you don't see that anywhere. In Portsmouth, they did away with sellers. So again, you've lost an identifiable part of a newspaper, i.e. somebody in your local high street shouting out Echo, Gazette.
Yeah, no, you're just taking me down memory lane, because you're right. You don't hear that. Express Echo. Exactly. That's what it used to be. Get your Echo.
But then, I mean, again, it's for somebody who used to work for the paper and obviously still works in journalism. It is sad to see, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Exeter is a big city now. I mean, population-wise, it's bigger than when I first started working there. Really, but obviously, you've got really what's a shell of a paper it used to be. But it's, in some way, that's only the same as lots of other papers, because obviously papers nowadays have obviously got lots fewer staff than they had. I mean, when I worked for the Echo, there were 5 of us just working on the sports desk.
Wow. Was that Trina Lake and people like
that? No, she left. Ed Hogg was covering City
Ed Hogg,
when I started working. So yeah, there were 5 of us. I mean, I've no idea how many they've got now, but I'd be surprised if they've got 2.
Yeah. It's amazing, and all it is down to technology and just a different way of doing things.
Of course, I mean, obviously, as the internet's risen, obviously newspaper sales have gone down. I mean, that's just mathematics.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, people are still interested. Well, my personal opinion, people are still interested in news, but they get it for free on the internet.
Yeah.
So that, from a newspaper perspective, it's very difficult to get people to buy newspapers if the stories that are appearing in the paper are available for free online, as they are. I mean, I get Devon Live on Facebook, so you can see the stories. So I'm just talking about City. I mean, the City stories that appear in the paper have already been on Devon Live.
Yeah.
From that point of view, you've then got to get a totally different product in the newspaper if you want to try and sell it.
But I go as far to say that even Devon Live is struggling, because I've seen a change in the football clubs are managing their brand, shall we say, with media, which is the sensible thing to do, and they are putting it out on their own channels first before it even gets to Devon Live.
Of course, I mean, all football clubs, non-league clubs, are probably doing that. Any news they've got, they'll put it out themselves. That's the whole point of social media, really. Yeah. And Exeter City do a very, very good job.
They do,
and I'm sure the social media presence is part of the reason why the crowds are, the interest levels are as high as they are at the moment.
And it's interesting because you know that Quad Pod's a little bit about fan ownership and stuff, and I've been through some of the accounts of some of the League One teams, and take Plymouth Argyle as an example, or Bolton or Ipswich. They're making absolute fortune out of their revenue streams linked to media and their channels, and it's a high percentage of their revenue compared to ticket sales and stuff, and that's why these clubs are doing it now. So it's great that Exeter City are really doing it well, because in theory we're getting some good revenues. So
they do it very well. I mean, you can't say otherwise. They do it very, very well.
Oh yeah,
and that's good. I mean, it's an internet age, and they've embraced it. You've got to embrace it. All clubs have embraced it.
Because You know, I live out of the area. You've lived out of the area. It would be impossible if we flash back 20 odd years. It would have been virtually impossible for me to find out anything about Exeter City in the old days compared to now, because it's just a different world.
What we used to do when I worked for the Echo, I mean, we're talking, I did quite a few away games up north where Ed couldn't be bothered to go. So I remember, say we play Hartlepool away. So I'd drive up to Hartlepool, you watch the game, you speak to the manager, Peter Fox, I think it was then, speak to one of the players. That's it. Obviously, no internet. So you drive back. So you go into work on the Sunday, you'd write it up, write the quotes up, and then it would go in the paper on the Monday. So obviously, match finishes 10 to 5 on a Saturday. First time people can read about it or read. I don't think I know it's a Sunday Independent, so you didn't buy that. You just bought the Echo. The first thing you'd read then, the quote of the match report, is the Monday morning.
Yeah.
Now you obviously could read the manager's quotes on social media, including Devon Live, within probably an hour and a half of the final whistle, and you can see a video and you can see the goals. But when I was growing up, if Exeter had a home game, you wouldn't see the goals till 5 o'clock on Monday evening on TV.
Yeah, you're right.
And then you don't see a couple, and if there's an away game, you might not see them at all.
And you'd be begging your dad, you'd be begging your mum and dad to got the paper so you could read the match report. Yeah, right.
Well, I say, obviously, with the internet, obviously, a journalist world has changed totally. I mean, as I said, back in the 1990s, I could go to a game, watch it, speak to the manager, and then the following day you type it up. Now, obviously, you're at a game, you're typing it up straight away.
Yeah. No, it's
I mean, obviously, the guys who cover Pompey for my paper, I mean, on the final whistle, there's a match report, and then obviously there's a video of the manager and some quotes from the manager within an hour and a half. Possibly a player quotes as well.
It's interesting. I've got a good friend of mine. I refer to him as the Newcastle fan. He listens and reads this, and he's got a daughter that's a journalist, and she's covering games up in Derby, Chesterfield way, and they have to get certain things up during the game at certain times. So it's even going another step forward in terms.
We have match blogs, but we were doing those in Southampton back probably 10 years ago now. So as the game going on, you're doing a blog, and you got photos, obviously, which from the game we can put up.
Yeah,
the internet has obviously changed society totally, but it is obviously one of the things it has changed is obviously journalism and the way journalists cover games. And obviously now you look at it, it's 1,000 times better than what it was before. You can't argue otherwise.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, and I'm going to come on to the subject. It's the summer holidays, right? Season's over. There is plenty of Exeter City fans just about to hopefully go on holidays or have a bit of time sat in the garden, right? And I'm going to say, because I've read it, you've written a book. It's been out since 2016.
2016 now, yeah. Copy's still available on Amazon.
Yeah, it's still available on Amazon. I looked earlier, just before this interview. Gus, Honeybun, your boys took a hell of a beating, pretty much.
That's the one.
Yeah. So, we've joked off camera that I'd actually written a book, and it actually delayed me putting my book out. So I just parked it for 5-7 years at least. I'm 190 pages in, and it's a bit different to yours, but it's a similar format. So, Bert, talk through your book because it's absolutely brilliant. Go on. What's it about?
The germ of the idea. Well, I suppose like anything. I mean, it is writing is my job.
Yeah,
I've always been a journalist. That's all I wanted to do. So I suppose everyone's creative. I mean, some people can dance, some people can play the guitar, some people can draw, some people can paint. I like to think creatively I can write. So armed with that, you think, well, everybody should like doing something that they're good at. But the germ of the idea for the book came, obviously, I was working in Southampton, and 2009, I think it was, Saints were relegated to the third division.
Yeah.
So obviously we were in the third division. So obviously back then we had a weekend football paper. I can't remember what it was called actually, so long ago. So I started writing a weekly article in that called Life in the Lower Divisions, kind of just like an intro, which hopefully of interest to Saints fans, saying what they can expect from the third division. Southampton hadn't played in the third division since early 1960s. So it's just bits on Plymouth and Exeter and talking, basically games I'd been to, grounds I'd been to, and my knowledge of the lower divisions. So I wrote that for the 2 years they were in the third division. So obviously I had all that stuff on our system, and really not a lot of the book, but some of the book was just bastardized versions of those articles I'd written in the paper. So from that, you obviously have a bank of words, and so the very first chapter of the book about Newcastle in 81, I'd written that 2008, 2009. I'd done nothing with it. I was just writing in one evening in work on a late shift while waiting for a Saints game to finish. And so once you have, like, say, all these words, you think, well, is there something I can do with that? And I've always wanted to write a book. It's totally different to writing journalism, writing for a paper. It's a totally different thing. It needs a totally different mindset. And it's the old classic cliche, everyone's got a book in them. And that's absolutely true. But can everybody write one? That's the key. So I'd like to think I can write. So I was lucky enough to get a professional publisher. They said, okay, we will publish it. This is your deadline. So I had about 9 months, 10 months in which to kind of come up with the finished product. And I was given a rough word count, so off you go. But I just wrote it now and then. Some days I sit down and write a chapter. The book's chronological, but I didn't write it chronologically. I just wrote chapters here and there.
Yeah, really? Okay.
The more you write, the more it kind of comes together. And then possibly the more you can remember. So another one of the earlier chapters then might be written later. But again, it's pieced together chronologically. And then I was quite fortunate. We ended up then playing Liverpool in the FA Cup, which is obviously one of the bigger games the clubs had.
Yeah.
So I delayed the manuscript by about a couple of weeks to get the Anfield game in. So that was a nice way to end it on a very big game.
Yes.
So I consider myself relatively lucky from that point of view. But it was a great experience, absolutely fantastic experience. But I've always said it's the easiest book to write because a lot of it was in the mind. It's your memories. I did a bit of research going through old Express and Echoes, Devon Records Library, but most of it is what I can remember.
And
I think I cribbed a few bits from the Exe Directory, a few things from Express and Echo match reports, but apart from that, it's what you can remember. And
do you know what? It's I'm going to embarrass you. If you want to know what it was like following Exeter City, in the lean times. And we had some good times in that book, but predominantly lean times, where football was in a different place. Our club was probably in a different place from a ownership perspective at times, because it wasn't a trust-run club at the time, was it? It was a lot of the book. It would have been pre-football trust, wouldn't it?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, Doble was the chairman, I think, most of my time in the 80s, but it was a totally different world. I mean, I was looking through the book earlier on, actually, my book, and there's a stat here. It's an incredible stat when you look back at it. In 1985-86, which was the first year I was at Exeter College, we played 46 games in the 4th division, and not a single one of them was watched by a crowd of over 4,000. Only six out of 46 games were watched by over 3,000. And that's the environment I grew up in. Really, I mean, I started going to watch City in the late 70s, early 80s, and obviously we had the cup run and we had some good league crowds. But when you're kind of growing up, kind of mid-teens, etc., it was the mid-80s, and football was poor, and the crowds were shocking compared to now. I mean, you're standing there on the big bank. We're playing Forest Green, who've bottomed the league, and we've got 7,500. You're playing Morecambe in a game really, which means nothing to us, and again over 7,000. That crowd from Morecambe was bigger than the crowd when we played Burnley in 89-90. I mean, just won the 4th division title.
Yes.
It's incredible when you look at it, really, because even 89-90 was obviously one of the club's best ever seasons. I think the average crowd, and I'm a big one for average crowds, the average crowd was under 5,000. Really. Yeah. Now you look at the season we just had, okay, there's more away fans this season than there was in 89-90. There was a hell of a lot more home fans.
And the average this year, 6,854.
That's amazing.
If I got that wrong, somebody correct me.
I mean, that's the biggest home average is 1964. There can't be many clubs in the Football League who've had to wait that long to beat their previous best average.
Yeah.
So all those points we had, the 76, 77s before my time, obviously lower. 89, 90, obviously lower. When we went up 2008, 9. Bear in mind, that was the second successive promotion. Obviously, the average crowd was lower. So at the moment, what they've done, you hesitate to use the word golden period, but the last few years, from City, if you're like a teenager, just getting into City, the last few years, you've had X amount of Wembley playoff finals. Okay, we've lost it, but we've been there. You've had a promotion, and you're playing third division games in front of 20,000.
Yeah,
It's incredible. I mean, Ipswich had more fans when they played us than when they won the 1981 UEFA Cup final. So I looked it up.
really.
Yeah, they had 26,000 for that. They had 29,000 for game against Exeter in the third division.
It's funny.
It's absolutely bonkers if you actually take a step back and look at football these days compared to what it was like in the 80s when I was growing up.
And
It's amazing,
I share that time because I'm only a couple of years younger than you guys that did the Exe Directory, and you are in effect like my brother's age. I think your gang at the time, and I was at Ipswich when we had 950 odd, right? And I'm stood there before the game thinking, God, it's 4.5, 5 hours from Exeter. We're probably going to get battered, which we did, right? And there was that amount of support. So I think that leads nicely on to, where do you see it going? Because obviously we've got more of a family club now, which is brilliant. Football's changed, hasn't it? Because it's not as, you're not likely to get beaten up every time you go to a football match, as an example.
No, I mean, so back in the mid 80s, again, it's easy to look back at it. It's easy if anyone look back on their youth with kind of rose-tinted glasses and the golden age of football. But the mid 80s was anything but a golden age of football. You can't even attempt to put a positive spin on it. You had hooliganism up and down the country. Obviously, you had the Bradford fire. The facilities were a disgrace. You had fences. You were treated football fans were treated like animals. Yes. Sometimes you could say, okay, it was deserved. You had Heysel, football's on his knees. Those crowd figures I've just mentioned. I mean, I've seen City now have sold 1,700 season tickets next season. Mid 80s, we were lucky to get that for a home game. Yeah. Really?
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and
it's fantastic. And like anything, you can appreciate it better if you've known a totally different scenario. And for those of us who grew up in like the mid 80s, going to City week in, week out, and going away now and again with crowds of away followers of, 40, 50, 60. I remember me and my dad, we went to Halifax once. There's only 4 City fans. We were 2 of them. My family made up 50% of City's away support. But that was those days, really. Yeah. But thankfully, hopefully, they'll never come back compared to what you've got now with the City average. I think I saw 750 away. Yeah, it's incredible for a club like Exeter.
Yeah, I can remember going to Hull City and being the only fan in the away end until about 5 minutes before kickoff, and then the people came out the pub because I'd come across from Huddersfield. I was at uni at the time, and all the home fans just like looking at me, laughing in effect. I was like trying to keep a low profile, but it's good. We're in a good place. So which brings me on nicely to. And by the way, sorry, Amazon. The link will be put on the podcast for your book. It is not only a stocking filler, it is a summer holiday must read.
Exactly. You got Father's Day coming up next month, so what better excuse do you want?
Exactly.
All dads like football.
All dads like football.
They'd love a copy.
Yeah, I tell you now, if your dad is between the age of 30 and 50, he'll absolutely love this book. Right, moving forward, this season, right? A little bit. What did you think of this season?
Well, I guess again, I always like to think of myself as a bit of a realist, and again, with my upbringing in the mid '80s, where we were basically shit for many years, the start of the season, my hopes were if we stay up, I'll be happy with that. Yeah. And obviously, we did stay up, and we stayed up quite easily. If you go on social media, you always see people say, "Oh, we should do this, we should do that, we should be higher." It's going to be difficult for City to get much higher than what they are. That's not to say I don't want them to, but it is difficult. And I think a few weeks ago I was looking at the league table, and if you look at all 4 divisions, I couldn't see a single club of Exeter in the league who were smaller than us. I know how you define a smaller club is arguable, but at the time I couldn't see a smaller club than Exeter above us in the entire Football League, which is great because it means we're kind of basically top of our tree. Could we go higher? Of course we can, but it'll need very good management because obviously there isn't the money to kind of take on Ipswich, Sheffield Wednesday, Derby, Pompey, those sort of clubs. You could, to beat them, and of course you could beat them. We did a double over Barnsley. But to beat them, you need very, very good management and very, very good recruitment. That's not to say it's impossible, but that's what you need.
And I'm a firm believer that we need to maximise all our revenue streams. We need to think about building on the fan base we've got at the moment. You've touched on it. It's phenomenal what our fan base is now. And also where it is with football. It's become... I don't think if I'd had a sister, I would have gone to football with a sister, whereas my son goes with his 18-year-old sister to football. I even bring my wife, and they feel safe. It wasn't the case years ago, wasn't it? So I think we need to expand the stadium. So
That's a moot point with me at the moment, expanding the stadium, because as I've said, I think the last 5-6 years, I mean, again, I wouldn't use the phrase golden period, but in terms of the club's entire history, we've been very good the last few years in terms of winning more games than we're losing. Yeah. I don't know if fear is the wrong word, but with the way the world is and the way social media is, and again, I mean, I was reading, whether it's just people fishing, but people like say Caldwell out after about 5 or 6 games of him coming in. Really, if we start next season losing a couple of games, is that all you're going to see? People don't seem to have much patience these days. So I'm just wary of the fact if we weren't to do so well next season, I'm not saying we won't, but if we weren't, a lot of the youngsters at the club nowadays aren't used to losing on a regular basis. Not used to being involved in a relegation battle. We haven't been involved in a relegation battle since 2013. 2014, that's a decade ago. That's a long time, really. And we've generally been used to being certainly towards the top end of the 4th division. And this year we were pretty good for mid-table, virtually from start to finish.
And from a ownership perspective, I think there was, in our views, there was at least 3 times we thought the club was going to go bust, and there was no stability. And we applied for re-election as well, didn't we? In the
I think 85-86, the season I mentioned earlier, I think they finished 4th bottom.
Yeah,
really. So again, it's like anything. Once you've been relegated to non-league football, as we were, I suppose it's always there in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we will get back to non-league football, but at the moment in time, we're punching above our weight, being a mid-table 3rd division club. That's based on history.
And by the way, non-league football is a lot stronger now than it was in those days.
I mean, all of it's stronger. I mean, you look now at the 3rd division. I mean, 80-81, obviously when we had the good cup run, I think we finished 8th or 9th in the 3rd division. And there were some big clubs then. I mean, from memory, you had, I think Pompey were there, Charlton, Huddersfield. But you weren't getting clubs with 25, 30,000 people like you are this season.
Yeah.
You could argue this season just gone was unusual to have so many kind of big inverted clubs. But if you look at it, you got Pompey, Derby, Bolton, Sheffield Wednesday, Ipswich. They're big clubs.
Yeah.
If you can put in 25, 30,000, Barnsley, these are ex-Premier League clubs. These are big clubs. And that's virtually a third of the 3rd division last season was that sort of club.
Yeah.
So to finish above any of those clubs, it'd be a remarkable achievement, really. I mean, in the last, 15, 20 years, I mean, you've had Yeovil in the Championship. You've had Burton Albion in the Championship. Bury, I remember, were in there. Scunthorpe were in there. And look where they are now. But that was then. Those clubs, I mean, it was galling to see Yeovil in the Championship. When I started work there, they were non-league football, as they are now, really. But if they could get there, why can't we? It's a good question to ask. But times have changed. Yeovil were there 10 years ago. Nowadays, I mean, you look at the Championship, they're all ex-Premier League clubs, basically. There's no really small club in those top 2 divisions.
Yeah,
the ones small are Bournemouth and Brentford. And based on the clubs, when I started watching football in the late 70s, we were playing Bournemouth and Brentford year in, year out, for donkey's years. They're the only 2 really small clubs. And
but what have they had really expensive? Bournemouth have had a massive investment. I think
they're a Russian owner. They were spending £800,000 on Matt Tubbs when they were in the third division. So while Bournemouth's success in reaching the Premier League first time round was seen as some fantastic romance, and of course it was, because it's AFC Bournemouth, there was a lot of money went into that club to get them into the Premier League, far more than people think. I suppose I worked in kind of Bournemouth as our sister paper, and I worked in Southampton, so I know them better than most. I know how much money was involved in Bournemouth to get them in the Premier League, and it's more than clubs like, say, Huddersfield or Cardiff or Swansea.
And I can remember I was invited into hospitality at Bournemouth many years ago by a neighbour who is a big Bournemouth fan, and it was jaw-dropping, the facilities up there. And it was to watch an Exeter game, and I couldn't believe it. It was the investment that they had in there. But I'm pleased to say that the Heritage Lounge is not too far off that. I think we're doing all right. Positive due. Moving to another subject, right? We've got about 5 minutes, right? You've been brilliant, right? You've obviously been a sports journalist, and you must have interviewed some crazy people. Who are the standout people that you've interviewed? You've got any crazy stories out there?
Well, I suppose, I covered Nottingham Forest for a year and a half when they were in the Premier League.
Right.
Clough had left, so Frank Clark was the manager. There were people like Tony Moore was playing, Stuart Pearce. They finished third in the Premier League. So that was great times. And then you obviously got to talk to the opposition manager afterwards in the press conferences. So that was kind of a taste of the big time, in inverted commas, and what football's like. But I mean, Viv Richards, great Somerset cricketer. I'm a big Somerset cricket fan. Obviously, growing up, I used to go and watch Somerset in the early 80s. And Viv was obviously just a colossus of the game. So to get the chance to speak to him 93, 94, when he came back with Glamorgan, was a great experience. And again, he just invited me into the Glamorgan dressing room. There was no press officers back then. It was easier to be a journalist in the 80s, 90s, before press officers came in. But that's like anything. That's the same in business. That's the same in politics.
Yeah.
So what journalists used to do, it's not so easy for them now, just kind of talking to players.
But... And I'm not going to stay where they are, but I do know that some of the Exe Directory team, like yourself, have gone on and forged careers following Exe Directory in a similar industry. And I know one other Exe Directory person has got a very interesting press job, although I won't say what it is, to protect the innocent. So I think the Exe Directory had a really positive effect, not only on you guys in football and Exeter, but also in your careers. Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, I look back on the Exe Directory. I still flick through them now and again. Bearing in mind, I mean, I'm not going to take any credit because it was David Allen's baby, but we were just teenagers when we started it. I mean, Al was only 17, I think.
Yeah.
So to produce a product like they produced, I mean, I was able to give a helping hand.
Yeah.
But to produce a product like that, basically a group of teenagers, was a great achievement.
Great achievement, yeah.
I mean, again, it's like anything in life. You don't really appreciate it at the time. But now you're looking, was it 35 years ago? It's a lifetime ago. But you look back at it, I've still got these fanzines, and it's great to look back on them. It's more than a snapshot of a different world.
It is.
A different world socially, and a different world football-wise, and a different world football-wise for Exeter.
Yeah.
Because those 7 years of the ED, they just finished third bottom of the Football League in 87, 88. And they were on their way to finishing bottom of the Football League in 94, 95 when the ED stopped. And in between those 7 years, there was the glory of winning the championship, winning the fourth division title. Yeah. So it has started kind of with the club on a low. Under Cooper, the club obviously rose high. And under Borley, there were some great games. But then obviously the club, for whatever reason, kind of nosedived financially.
Yeah.
So, and that was it. So within 7 years, you had all the highs and all the lows. But I look back and it is... I was proud to work for the Exe Directory, to write for it, because it was a great time for fanzines. Yeah. And I'm glad some of them are still going. It'd be great to see a City one still going. I don't think
well, I know that you put shout outs to the Crockfords. I think you know that I spoke to them and they suggested yourself to come on. So I haven't sort of stolen their thunder, and I know you haven't as well. I just wanted to make that clear for the pod because they were quite happy for you to do this. But I also remember there was Will Score Again, and there was DNA.
Will Score Again, I think it was the Sports magazine, wasn't it? Sports Club magazine. And again, for most of this time, I was kind of out of not living in Exeter, so I was aware of it, but I wasn't a regular. And I think there was some Sunny Day, was it?
Sunny Day and
I wrote a couple of pieces for them, kind of when the book came out, in a blatant bit of kind of plugging my book, as you do.
Yeah.
And that was a good read. I was sent the fanzines, but again, I don't think that's going anywhere. I don't know how long it's not been going for.
Yeah, no, I think they went on for a few years, but like Exe Directory unfortunately stopped, and it's a massive record of the time. So
that's the best thing about it. When I look back at it, it is like a great record of City and a great record of being a fan in the late 80s and early 90s. Because for anyone who's just followed the club in the last 10 years, as I've said, and I'll happily repeat, it's a different world entirely.
It is.
And like all worlds, something's better. Some are better, some are worse. But you look at the state of the club now and the amount of fans, the amount of interest, it's fantastic to see.
It is.
Compared to what I was brought up with.
Yeah. And on that, and that's a bit of a negative note, but
you've got to have known the negative to appreciate the positives.
Exactly.
That's the key. That's the key. So I just hope now, if the next few years that there is kind of a bad run of results, I hope the feeling of negativity, which I know I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter personally and through work. I'm on Facebook personally and through work. I know how toxic football fans can be, and this is at all levels. Really. Yeah. So you just hope that if we have a bad run of results, and I'm not saying towards the end of the season where really it's immaterial because we're safe, but like a bad run of results at the start of the season, people keep a sense of perspective. But that's not easy in today's world. I appreciate that.
And we mustn't sound like grumpy old men, because when we always say in our time it was terrible, but I have to say we both agree with this. It was a pretty hard time compared to now. But
of course it was, yeah. Of course it was. I mean, off the top of my head, 83-84, won 6 games all season, finished bottom of the league, bottom of the 3rd division. Yeah. Following season, pretty poor. 85-86, re-election, 4th bottom. 86-87, didn't win a single away game. 87-88, 3rd bottom of the Football League. And we averaged about 2 or 3 away wins a season, really. Yeah. And the average away support, as you well know, was, I'm not saying it was under 100, it was probably a bit more, but it probably wasn't much.
No more than 120.
Compared to the last few years.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It is great to see, of course it is. I wouldn't want to go back to those days.
No.
Who would, really? I mean, everyone says their youth's better, but when it comes to watching the football team, my youth wasn't better.
No, and I'd agree with that. Do you know what? You've been brilliant, and I want to really thank you for coming on. It personally means a lot, and this was, I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit because I got John Delve on, and for me, that I've got a little tick box of some people that I want to go on. It's like Panini stickers in a sticker album, and I've just got one of the Exeter City crest, and it's just going on the Exeter City page, getting somebody from Exe Directory to come and talk about things, and because it's a moment into my youth. I'm not just saying that, it was brilliant. Thank you for doing it. I know we see each other at City games. Come on again in the future. You'd be very welcome. Be a pundit. Thanks for your time. And
I'll come on when I write another book.
Yeah, when you get your book. Yeah. By the way, you don't forget the book. It is brilliant. If you're going on a plane as an Exeter fan, I want to see a picture on your Twitter account of you with the book on a plane, and I will promise to go and get it back out and reread it myself, and do that at some point over the summer. All right.
I'm not reading myself, actually. I'm not sure I've ever read it.
Really?
I think when you kind of, obviously to write a book, you obviously you write in chapters, then you read the chapter and possibly editing it, and then you're going back and changing it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've probably read it 50 times, but all within a space of about a year. And then when you've actually done it, it's just such a relief.
I can honestly say I'm not a book reader. I've never have been.
Oh, I certainly have.
But I read the book in less than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think I read it in about 2 weeks flat. And that, as I say, I can read, but I'm not a good reader and speed wise. So
It's a labour of love. I mean, I suppose writing, you can say a lot of things are a labour of love, but when 135,000 words, it's quite a few words. And obviously you write it, then you got to go back and perhaps you rewrite bits.
I think,
or circumstances change, or there's a good game, and so yeah, it was a massive relief to get it done. A great feeling, an absolutely superb feeling.
indeed.
One of the best things I've ever done, because it's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say writing books are easy. It's not. There's no money to be made unless you're J.K. Rowling.
Yeah,
it's not a money maker whatsoever. It's a labour of love, and I knew that would be the case when I started it. I didn't write it to make much money. I just wrote it, A, because I wanted to, and B, because I thought I could write.
And there's a book in everybody.
There's a book in everybody, but then not everybody can write. So then that's why you have ghostwriters, I suppose, on the top level.
Yeah,
but it was great, and I'm proud of myself for doing it.
Well, look out for the words taken from Exe Directory in a book coming soon, because I will get round to it. I think it's 11,026 miles to Colchester or something like that. And on that note, I can't wait to see it again next season. Right? And let's hope we sign about 5 players and see what the roller coaster holds.
Yeah, a few will be handy.
Yeah, maybe a stranger. Thanks for coming on. Take care.
Yes.